Welcome to our deep dive, and it looks like we're diving deep into dreams this time. Specifically, the idea that dreams might have some divine messages for us.
Dreams are definitely fascinating, especially when we start looking at them through that lens, the lens of maybe getting messages, from a higher power.
You've brought a lot of material about, well, prophetic dreams. That seems to be what you've been really focused on.
Yeah, it is, and especially the kind where it feels like maybe God is trying to communicate with us while we're sleeping.
Okay, I see that. And you've been really drawn to 7 types of dreams in particular. Looks like we've got angels, voices, what else? Animals, rainbows.
Numbers.
Oh, numbers.
Yeah,
Okay, mentors showing up in dreams.
and even dreams where you're the one praying for others.
So, wow, we've got a lot to unpack here. 7 categories. Let's see what wisdom we can kind of pull out of these different types. Maybe we'll even uncover some personal meaning for you along the way. What do you think?
I think that sounds great. Exploring dreams is something that people have been doing for centuries. Trying to understand these messages, it's a pretty timeless quest.
It really is. Okay, let's jump right in with dream category 1, angels. You've included the story of Jacob's ladder, right? Angels going up and down this ladder, God reaffirming his promises. But why? What makes this story so powerful? It's more than just a cool image, right?
Right, I think so. It's more than just a stairway to heaven, right? It's like a bridge between the divine and the human world.
Hmm.
A way for them to communicate. And those angels, right? They're messengers, aren't they? Carrying information, maybe even warnings, back and forth between those worlds.
Okay, so applying that idea to our own lives, what could it mean? If we think about these angels as messengers, could it mean that even when we're feeling alone, there's actually this constant communication happening? A potential for support and guidance from somewhere beyond our immediate world.
It's definitely an interesting thought, and it makes you wonder, right? What messages might those angels be carrying for us today?
So do people still have these angelic dream encounters? Like in modern times, does that still happen?
It does. And the interpretations, they can be really different, depending who you ask. Some people see these dreams with the angels and feel comfort, like a sense of being protected. And then others, they see them as a sign of guidance,
Yeah.
like they're being nudged in a certain direction. And then some people, they even see them as warnings, to be careful, or maybe even to change course in their life.
Okay, yeah. It doesn't sound like the source material gives us just one interpretation, does it? It seems like the meaning, depends a lot on the individual, on their own circumstances, what's going on in their life.
You're absolutely right. It's not like there's a universal dream dictionary. The key is to connect with your own intuition about what these symbols might mean for you.
So if you think about your own life, what feelings do you have when you think about angels? And have you had any dreams, any past dreams that kind of fit into this angel category?
It's a really interesting question. It makes you think about these archetypes, right?
Yeah.
And how they relate to our own personal experience, our own lives.
Okay, let's move on to dream category 2. This one is the voice, and this feels super relatable to me. Have you ever woken up from a dream and felt like you actually heard something? Like a voice speaking to you, maybe even giving you guidance or a warning?
I think most people have had that experience. It can be pretty amazing, candid. It can even be a little scary. And the source material talks about some of these biblical examples, right? Samuel hearing God's call, and he was just a boy then. And Solomon, right? It's Solomon asking for wisdom in a dream. And then Joseph, receiving really specific, really clear instructions. It's interesting though, because the way that voice shows up, it's different in each of those cases, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. It's not always this big booming voice from the heavens, right? Sometimes it's just a whisper.
Yeah.
Or just a feeling, a knowing.
Yeah, like with Samuel, right? He heard his name called.
Yeah.
And that's what led him to go to Eli the priest to ask for guidance. And Solomon, well, it wasn't so much about hearing, it was more like a deep understanding, like he just knew what he wanted. And then Joseph, well, he got a clear message.
Yeah.
With instructions that he could act on, like take Mary as your wife, flee to Egypt, and then come back to Israel. So it seems like there's really no one way that God's voice shows up in dreams.
That's a good point. It means we don't have to expect some dramatic Hollywood style voice booming at us, right?
Yeah.
It could be a lot more subtle, a lot more nuanced. And the source material really emphasizes this idea of discerning the message, what's
Yeah.
being said, what it means in your life, and what it's telling you to do.
And to do that, to really discern those messages, that takes practice, doesn't it? The source material suggests some ways to cultivate that ability, like reading the Bible, meditating, thinking about its teachings, and even talking to someone wise, someone who can help you understand what you might be hearing.
That makes sense. Sometimes we need that outside perspective to help us, connect the dots. And speaking of connecting dots, let's move on to dream category 3. Animals. What comes to mind for you when you think of animals and their symbolism in dreams?
Oh, animals and dreams are so fascinating. They're so rich in symbolism.
Yeah.
I mean, people have been captivated by animals and dreams for centuries.
Mhm.
And what's so interesting is that they can represent so many different things, like parts of ourselves or maybe situations that we're in. And of course, those divine messages that we're exploring.
Right. It's like they add this whole other layer, this whole other dimension to the dreamscape. But it sounds like the way the source material is talking about it, animal symbolism isn't always straightforward. The interpretation really depends on the animal and the context of the dream itself.
Exactly. You can even take an animal like a lion, for instance. In one dream, it could symbolize strength,
Hmm.
or courage or leadership. But then in another dream, it could be a threat, like a warning about someone who's trying to harm you.
So you can't just look up lion in a dream dictionary and be done with it.
Definitely not. It's about going deeper, I think. You have to consider your own feelings about the animal, and maybe even more importantly, how you felt during the dream.
Yeah.
Were you afraid of the lion, or did it make you feel powerful? Those emotions are really important.
That reminds me of Pharaoh's dream in the Bible, that one with the fat cows and then the thin cows. It's such a strange image. But then Joseph comes along and he interprets it, and it ends up being about 7 years of plenty, followed by 7 years of famine. And Pharaoh, he's a practical guy, so he uses that information to stockpile grain, which ends up saving Egypt from starvation.
Right. It's a great example of how even these bizarre images and dreams, they can give us really practical guidance,
Yeah.
or warnings if we learn to decode them.
Have you had any animal dreams that stick out in your mind? What were the animals? How did you feel? Maybe that's a good place to start with your own decoding.
That's a great idea, because sometimes, those random images, those things that pop up while we're sleeping, they can lead to some really profound insights.
Okay. Well, let's move on from animals, those furry and feathered friends, and let's talk about something a little more, I guess, colorful, definitely more hopeful. Dream category 4. Rainbows. I mean, rainbows, they've got to be a good sign, right? What do you think?
Rainbows definitely have those positive connotations.
Yeah.
Especially when we're talking about spirituality, about faith. They make people think about hope and new beginnings.
Mm.
Like a promise from God.
What does the source material say about rainbows, though, specifically in dreams?
Well, it goes right to that big story of Noah,
Yeah.
the flood, the ark, and that rainbow is a sign of God's covenant, right? It's a promise that He'll never destroy the world of the flood again. It's powerful, isn't it? That idea of beauty coming out of chaos, of hope after all that devastation. It really is.
Well, yeah.
And what's interesting is the source material doesn't stop there. It also mentions those visions that Ezekiel and John had, where they describe these rainbows around God's throne. And that connects the symbol, not just to promises, but to God's glory, His majesty, His presence.
So it's not just about getting through the storm, is it? It's about this awe-inspiring power that's there even when the storms happen.
Right. It's like even in those really dark moments, there's still beauty. There's a higher power at work.
Okay, I'm getting chills. Those chills you get when you see like a double rainbow after a storm?
Right.
There's this sense of wonder, gratitude.
Yeah, it is powerful. And think about your own experiences. Have there been times in your life where you felt God's love?
Yeah.
Even though you were going through something hard? Could a rainbow dream? Could it be kind of like that? A reminder that even in the hardest times, there's still beauty, still hope.
It's a really beautiful thought, and it makes sense. That symbolism of the rainbow as a bridge between heaven and earth, a connection between us and God.
Yeah, like we can look beyond the the challenges we're facing right now,
Hmm.
and remember that there's something bigger going on, that even after the flood,
Yeah.
there's a rainbow.
Okay, well, let's move on to a category that feels a little trickier, maybe even a little mysterious. Dream category 5, numbers. Numbers and dreams. I don't know, I find them confusing sometimes. I mean, what does it even mean to dream about a number?
It's true. Numbers can be tricky. Even the source material, it says that some are easier to understand than others. Some have like clear biblical meanings. Others, it depends more on the person or the dream itself.
The source material mentions Pharaoh's dream again, but this time it's talking about the number 7. The 7 years of plenty, the 7 years of famine. And in the Bible, the number 7 a lot of times represents completeness, perfection, a cycle ending.
And in this case, Joseph's interpretation, it's based on that number 7. And it's what helps Pharaoh to get ready to save Egypt. It shows how important numbers can be in dreams, even if we don't get it right away.
But then there's that other example from Nebuchadnezzar's dream, the one where he goes mad for 7 years. That number 7 pops up again. But this time it's not good. It's connected to judgment and hardship, like the opposite of what it meant before.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? How the same number can mean such different things, and it reminds us that not all these messages are going to be easy to hear. Sometimes the numbers, they point to areas where we need to grow, or times where we'll have to face some tough stuff.
So how do we know? I mean, how do we know if a 7 in our dream is good or bad?
That's where discernment comes in, and I think the source material gives us a good tip here. It says to pay attention to the numbers that really stand out to us in our dreams, especially the ones that make us feel something strong.
So it's not just the number itself, it's how we feel about it.
Exactly.
Yep.
If a number keeps showing up, or if it fills you with dread, or if it makes you feel really hopeful for some reason, those are clues, right? Maybe they're little pieces of a bigger puzzle trying to tell us something about our lives, or maybe about our spiritual journey.
And maybe sometimes we just have to accept that we don't have all the answers, and trust that God is working things out, even if we don't understand it all.
I think that's a really wise perspective. Not every dream has to be, perfectly understood. Sometimes it's enough to just notice, to pay attention to what stands out, and to be open to the possibility that maybe God is trying to tell us something, even if it's a little cryptic.
Okay, well, this next category, this one feels a little less cryptic.
Oh.
And a lot more personal. Dream category 6, mentors. Have you ever had a dream where a teacher or a guide or someone you really admire, have you ever had them show up in your dream? I feel like that's something you hear about a lot, in myths and stories and things. But what does it mean when it happens to us in our dreams?
Yeah, it is a pretty common theme.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it speaks to that need we all have, to be guided, to find wisdom, to figure out where we're going in life. And the source material, it gives us a few examples from the Bible, like Joseph, the one who interpreted Pharaoh's dreams. Well, he also had those dreams where his brothers, they were bowing down to him, even though they didn't like him at all.
Yeah.
And those dreams, well, they foreshadowed, how he would become powerful later on, and how he would save his family from the famine.
It's like those dreams, they gave him a sneak peek, like a glimpse of what was supposed to happen, even though things were really tough at that time.
And it wasn't just about him being ambitious,
Yeah.
Ultimately, those dreams, they were about him fulfilling God's purpose, and saving people's lives. And the source material, it connects that idea to other people in the Bible too, like Gideon and Ananias. They received guidance, from these mentors in their dreams.
It's almost like God was sending them messengers, to get them ready for what they were supposed to do.
Right. So if you're dreaming of a mentor, could it be a sign that you should look for guidance in real life too? Is there someone you could learn from? Maybe a group of people who could support you, encourage you.
It's a good thing to think about. Who are your mentors? Or who would you want to be your mentor? What is it about them that you admire, and could those qualities could they be reflected in your own life, in what
Yeah.
you're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, maybe there are ways we can develop those qualities in ourselves,
Yeah.
or actually go out and find those mentors. It's
Yeah.
about realizing that there's so much potential for growth, for guidance,
Yeah.
all around us in our dreams and in our real lives too.
Okay, let's talk about our last dream category. Dream category 7, praying for others. Have you ever had a dream, where you were really, really worried about someone? Where you felt like you should be praying for them, even though you weren't, consciously thinking about their problems when you were awake?
I think a lot of us can relate to that. And it reminds us that prayer isn't just about asking God for things we need. It's also about praying for other people, about showing empathy and compassion,
Hmm.
feeling connected to other people on a deeper level.
And the source material gives us some really powerful examples of this, like Job praying for his friends, Daniel praying and praying for understanding, and Peter breaking out of prison. And it seems like the prayers of the early church, they had a lot to do with that. These stories, they really show us how powerful prayer can be. It can change things, bring healing, even change the course of history.
Right. And it's not always about these big miracles. Sometimes it's just about thinking of someone, you know, holding them in your heart, sending them your love. Even if we don't see the results right away, I think those prayers, they still matter. They still make a difference.
That's right. The source material says that these prayers for other people, they're not always about immediate outcomes.
Mhm.
They can also affect spiritual battles. They can even bring about long-term change. Sometimes those silent prayers, those prayers that we say in our hearts,
Yeah.
the ones that are part of our dreams, well, those are the most powerful ones.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And it suggests that even when we're sleeping, our spirits, they can be doing things, right? Like acts of love, acts of service, that even our dreams can be a way for God to intervene, to heal, to bring hope.
It makes you want to take that compassion that we feel in our dreams and bring it into our everyday lives. So is there anyone you feel like you should be praying for right now? What would it look like to really commit to that, to make that a regular part of your life?
That's a good challenge for all of us. Who are those people in our lives? The people who need our prayers, who need our support, who need our love. Maybe our dreams can be a place where we practice being more compassionate,
Yeah.
more connected, where we expand our idea of what it means to be in relationship with each other and with God.
Okay, well, before we move on, there's one more thing the source material brings up that I think we should talk about. It talks about, the things that can get in the way, the things that can block us from hearing God in our dreams. We've been talking about all these amazing possibilities. But the truth is sometimes it's hard, isn't it? It's hard to receive those messages, to even recognize them in the middle of everything that's going on in our lives, all the clutter in our minds.
That's true. The source material definitely talks about those roadblocks, and it even lists some of the most common ones.
So what are they? What are some of those things that might be blocking us from hearing God?
It lists a bunch of them, and they're pretty relatable, to be honest. Things like sin, not being close to God, all the noise and distractions in our lives, fear,
Yeah.
doubt, expectations, biases,
Yeah.
lack of consecration, and even just a lack of discernment. It's a pretty long list, isn't it? And it can be a little overwhelming.
Yeah, it can. It's like, how are we supposed to overcome all of that? But the good thing is the source material also says that we're not powerless.
Right.
We can do things to become more receptive to God's messages, even in our dreams.
That's right. And that's what we'll talk about in the next part of our deep dive. We'll look at some practical things we can do, to overcome those obstacles, to open ourselves up more to the wisdom and the guidance that might be waiting for us in the world of dreams.
So we've been talking about all those things that get in the way of hearing God in our dreams, the sin, the distractions, the fear, all that stuff that can kind of mess with our connection. But the good news is the source material doesn't just, dump all these problems on us and then leave us hanging. It gives us some actual strategies, some things we can do to overcome those obstacles. So where do we even begin?
Well, the source material really emphasizes starting with a solid foundation.
Oh,
And in this context, I think that means dealing with the whole issue of sin. It's that idea that sin can create this barrier between us and God, And it makes it harder to hear that quiet voice, that divine
But
guidance.
trying to listen to the radio with all that static.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
And so what's the solution? Well, the source material talks about repentance,
Hmm.
recognizing where we've messed up, asking for forgiveness, and really trying to live in a way that aligns with our values. It's about clearing out that static so we can actually tune in to God's frequency.
But it's not just about getting rid of the bad stuff, is it? It's also about actively, working on our relationship with God, making it deeper. The source material uses this phrase, intimate fellowship with God, which I gotta say sounds a little intimidating. What does that even look like, practically speaking?
Oh, it's a beautiful phrase though, isn't it? It
Feels really.
suggests that closeness,
Hmm.
that trust. It's not just about asking God for stuff and hoping he delivers. It's about having a real conversation, really listening, just just being present with God.
Okay, so that sounds great in theory,
Hmm.
but how do we actually do that? How do we create that intimacy in our relationship with God?
Well, the source material offers a few suggestions. It talks about making prayer and meditation a priority,
Mm.
spending time with scripture, seeking God not just in words but also in spirit and truth, and really trying to listen for guidance instead of just rattling off a list of what we want.
So it's about making it a two-way street, right?
Exactly. And then the source material gets even more specific. It talks about the environment,
Yeah.
especially before we go to sleep, like minimizing distractions, creating a space that's peaceful, that's quiet, that helps us to become more receptive.
So like turning off the TV an hour earlier, putting our phones on silent, dimming the lights, maybe even using some lavender oil or something, right? It's about setting the stage.
Oh, and I'm already feeling more relaxed just thinking about it.
Me too.
Yeah.
But then there's that stuff we carry around inside, the
And
fear, the doubt, and those expectations that can really mess with our ability to see things clearly. I think we've all been there, hoping for a specific message, praying for a specific outcome, and then feeling disappointed when our dreams don't give us what we
I'm
want.
sorry, sure, that happens to everyone. And the source material really encourages us to let go of those expectations, to go into our dreams with an open mind, an open heart, to trust that God will communicate in a way that makes sense for us, even if it's not what we were expecting.
It's that whole let go and let God thing, right?
Yeah. Surrender control, trust the process, be open to being surprised. And then there's this idea of consecration. The source material says it's about dedicating our whole lives to God's will. And that might sound kind of scary, like a big commitment. But the way I see it, it's less about these huge gestures and more about the little choices we make every day, choosing to live in a way that honors God, you know, in everything we do.
So it's about living with integrity, about really trying to live out our beliefs. And I think that brings us to the last piece of the puzzle, discernment. Because as the source material points out, not every dream is a message from God, right? Sometimes a dream is just a dream, just random thoughts and images.
Exactly. And that's where discernment is so important. Being able to tell the difference between those dreams that might have a deeper meaning and those that are just our brains,
Yeah.
processing stuff from the day,
Yeah.
or maybe working through our anxieties. The source material says to test the spirits, to compare what we're hearing in our dreams with scripture, to talk to wise people, and to trust our own intuition about what feels true.
So even when we're talking about spirituality, we still need to think critically.
Oh, absolutely. It's about being open, but also being wise, willing to believe, but also questioning things, testing things, seeking confirmation. And that's where keeping a dream journal can be so helpful.
Yeah, the source material talks a lot about that, doesn't it? Writing down our dreams.
It does. And I don't think it's about trying to analyze every little thing.
Yeah.
It's more about capturing those images, those
Mm.
feelings right when we wake up. So we can think about them later. Sometimes you start to see patterns, things you wouldn't have noticed otherwise.
So it's about noticing those themes, those symbols that keep popping up. And as we do that, we can start to see how they connect to our waking lives, our spiritual journeys, the challenges we're facing.
Right. And I think the source material makes another important point. It talks about the importance of community, of connecting with other people who believe, who share our faith, sharing our experiences, praying together. It's a reminder that we're not supposed to do this alone,
Yeah.
that we can find strength, find wisdom in supporting each other.
It's about recognizing that we're all connected, that our journeys are intertwined, and that sometimes the best insights come from sharing our stories and really listening to each other.
And finally, there's the simple practice of gratitude. The source material talks about thanking God for those moments of connection, even if we don't totally understand them. It's about acknowledging that even when we mess up, when we struggle, God is still there. He's still guiding us, loving us, trying to bring us closer.
Okay, well, I think we've really unpacked those obstacles, haven't we? What do you say we wrap up this deep dive by exploring some of those amazing dream stories from the Bible that you brought with you?
I'm all for that. Let's see what we can learn from those ancient stories and how they might shed some light on our own experiences with dreams and divine messages.
We've already touched on a few of them, like Jacob's ladder and Pharaoh's dreams with the cows and the grain, and Nebuchadnezzar's dream about the tree. Those are some classic examples,
Yeah.
of dreams that actually had real world consequences. But there's so many other cool stories in the source material. Stories that show us all the different ways that God might use dreams to communicate.
You're right. Like the story of Gideon. He was just a regular guy, but God called him to rescue Israel from the Midianites. And he wasn't exactly a hero at first, was he? He doubted himself, questioned God's plan. But in the end, he was totally transformed by these dreams and visions that confirmed his calling, that gave him the courage to do what he was supposed to do.
So how did those dreams work? Did God give him a pep talk, like a motivational speech in a dream?
It was actually much more subtle than that. Gideon, he asked for a sign, for proof that he was really being called to lead. He put a fleece on the ground, and he asked God to make the fleece wet with dew, but to keep the ground around it dry.
Okay, so that's a pretty specific request, not exactly your typical prayer.
Right. And God did it. He honored his request. The next morning, the fleece was soaking wet, and the ground was totally dry. But Gideon, he was still unsure. So he asked for another sign. This time he wanted the ground to be wet and the fleece to stay dry.
Yeah.
And God did it again. It was like God was saying, look, Gideon, I'm here. I'm listening. I'm with you.
It's like God was willing to meet Gideon right where he was at, to
Yeah.
speak to him in a way he would understand, even if it meant changing the weather just to prove a point.
And through those signs, Gideon, he finally got the confirmation he needed. He was able to overcome his doubts and do what God was calling him to do. It's a reminder that sometimes we need that tangible proof,
Mhm.
even when it comes to spiritual experiences.
And then there's the story of Cornelius, the Roman centurion.
Yeah.
He got a message from God through a vision. He wasn't Jewish, but he was what they called a God-fearer, someone who respected the Jewish God but hadn't converted. So how did a dream come into play for him?
Well, Cornelius was praying one day, and an angel appeared to him,
Yeah.
and told him to send for the Apostle Peter. And at the same time, Peter himself had a vision, this weird dream where a sheet came down from heaven, and it was full of all kinds of animals that were considered unclean, according to Jewish law.
Wait, so God sends a Roman soldier to go get one of Jesus' disciples, and then he uses a dream about a sheet full of unclean animals to kind of shake up Peter's ideas about who deserves God's grace.
Exactly. It was a really radical thing. It's a sign that the gospel was meant for everyone. And those dreams, those interventions from God, well, they led to a really important moment in the early church. It was the beginning of Gentiles, non-Jewish people being included in the Christian faith.
It's amazing to think about, how God can use dreams not just for individuals, but to actually change the course of history. And then, of course, there's Daniel, the dream interpreter. He figured out Nebuchadnezzar's dream about the tree, but he also had his own dreams and visions, and that revealed God's plans for Israel and the nations around them. But his dreams, they weren't always easy to understand, were they? The source material talks about them being full of like weird creatures and symbols that took a lot of work to interpret.
They were definitely complicated and sometimes even a little scary.
Yeah.
But they gave hope to the Israelites. They reminded them that even though they were in exile, even though they were suffering, that God was still in control, that he was working things out for their good.
So even when things feel uncertain or scary, dreams can give us glimpses of hope, help us to see the bigger picture, remind us that we're not alone. And Daniel's example, it shows us how important it is to ask for help when we're interpreting our dreams, especially the ones that are really confusing or unsettling.
That's right. We need each other. We need to
Yep.
share our experiences, to ask for help in making sense of what we're seeing and feeling.
And speaking of asking for help, one of the most famous dream stories is about Joseph, Mary's husband. He got a few messages from angels, through dreams, and those messages, they totally changed his life.
Oh, yeah. An angel appeared to Joseph in a dream and told him not to be afraid to marry Mary, even though she was pregnant. The angel explained that the baby she was carrying had been conceived by the Holy Spirit. That was a pretty radical message. It totally disrupted his plans. But Joseph, he trusted the dream and he obeyed.
It must have taken a lot of faith to do that, to go against what everyone expected and believe in something that seemed so crazy, so impossible.
It did. And those messages from the angels, they kept coming. Throughout Jesus's early life, they guided Joseph to flee to Egypt, to protect Jesus from Herod, and then later to come back to Israel when it was safe. Those dreams, they were so important. They played a key role in God's plan, in protecting Jesus and raising him.
It's powerful, isn't it? The way dreams can be like these channels for God to work, sometimes in the most unexpected ways.
All these stories, all these dream stories from the Bible, I think they show us something really important, that there's no one right way to interpret dreams. It's really personal. It depends on the context. What might be a warning for one person could be an encouragement for someone else. What might be symbolic in one dream could be literal in another.
So it's not about finding the perfect interpretation. It's about being open to the mystery of it all, being open to the possibility that God might be speaking to us in a way that's unique to us,
Yeah.
to our own journey.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to approach our dreams with curiosity, with humility, with a willingness to ask for guidance from the Holy Spirit.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into dreams and divine messages, I have one last question for you. And it's kind of a twist on what we've been talking about. The source material, it's focused on dreams where God might be speaking to us. But what if you had a dream where you felt called to speak to God? What would that conversation be like? What would you say? What would you ask?
That is such a beautiful question. And it reminds us that prayer isn't just about us presenting our requests. It's also about making space for dialogue, for listening, for that intimate fellowship that we talked about earlier. And maybe our dreams can be like portals for that kind of two-way communication, a place where we can meet God in a way that feels more personal, more intimate.
I love that. It makes me think about how limited words can be, and how dreams with all their images and symbols and feelings, maybe they can help us express things that we can't put into words.
It's like an invitation to explore,
Yeah.
to explore those deeper parts of ourselves, to connect with God in ways that go beyond what our waking minds can grasp.
We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity and given you some new tools to explore your own dreams. Sweet dreams and happy decoding.